Hey everyone! We have another art journal video. I'll be using these Studio Calico Mr. Huey sprays. These are limited edition and I couldn't find where you could buy them online. All the colors came as a bundle and are all neon colors. Let's see what we make. To start, I'm using Staples 80-pound cardstock. And then I'm covering them with Mr. Huey's sprays. I had these for at least a year or maybe longer, and this is the first time cracking them open. I'm following the Roy G. Biv when laying down the colors. I do like the sprays and they spray quite well. I like the nozzle and they're easy to pump. I did find some colors worked better than others. And what I mean by that is that they turned out more splotchy. And what I mean by that is later on you'll see that the red turned out more splotchy than the others. It could have been because I was spraying too close to the paper, but I found the same thing happened with the purple. You won't see it in the video, but I did respray the purple and it still dried very splotchy. When I use a spray, there are a lot of air bubbles and then over time the air bubbles would pop and dry an even color. But for the purple, where the air bubbles were, they dried with air bubble rings. And even when I sprayed the purple again, I made sure to soak the cardstock thoroughly and as evenly as possible, and then I saw it was going to dry unevenly again. So while it was still wet, I took a paper towel and wiped the ink around to see if it would work better. It did work a lot better, but I felt like the formula was still different than the other inks. The Mr. Huey neon set didn't come with a blue, so I created one using my Stampin' Up! Ink refill for the color Pacific Point. I placed about 5 drops into a Ranger mini mister and filled up the rest with water and sprayed away. I like using the sprays because I could get a gradient rainbow effect. All the colors would have similar saturation since they're all neon. Originally, I was going to go through my mountain of colored cardstock to make the rainbow, but I quickly realized it was going to be a lot of work and that I couldn't guarantee the same saturation. So I'm loving the gradient rainbow effect that you can achieve with the sprays. And again, when the paper was all filled up, I used the heat gun to dry it out. When I lift a paper, you can see how soaked the paper is. While giving the cardstock more time to dry, I'm going to get my Moleskine sketchbook ready. I'm using Faber-Castell's gel medium to glue 2 pages together to give a sturdy back. And then I'm doing the same to the other side. Anyways, I wasn't sure if I wanted a white background or a black background, so I'm trying to decide. I decided to go with the black because I thought it would make the neon colors pop just a little bit more than the white. So I'm using black Dollarstore acrylic paint to paint the background. I put way too much on. After making sure everything was covered, I still had some excess paint, so I'm using the brush to scrape away the excess paint. Since I put too much paint on, it started to bleed through to the other art journal page before it, in the binding area. So be careful of how much you use. Again, using my heat gun to speed up the drying process. I love that the black turned out to be matte. It reminds me of chalkboard paint. Once everything is dry, I'm using my Fiskars paper trimmer to cut 1-inch strips. You'll notice that my cutter doesn't cut straight by the end. I believe it's because the alignment is off, but I can still work around it for now. Once I have all the strips cut down, I'm ready to cut them the other way to make 1-inch squares. I could have used punches or die cuts, but I didn't have any of these on hand. You could also use a craft knife, but paper trimmer works for me. I'm cutting 1 inch or sometimes a small portion off the end. That is where the ink gathered and dried darker, or didn't have a smooth gradient as I would have liked, so I just cut them off. You will notice that I'm cutting the squares in the center, that way I can line it up on all sides to get more symmetrical squares. I even tried cutting multiple strips at once to make the process go faster, but that didn't work out so well. I just created more work for myself. In the video you'll see I cut only 1 square from each of the strips, but I did cut 3 altogether from each strip. I felt 1 was too little for the size of project. And then when all the squares are cut, I'm laying them on my sketchbook to see where I would like the placement to go. Once I have my basic layout, I'm using double-sided adhesive to adhere the pieces down. I'm using score tape instead of gel medium because the gel medium I have is a semi-gloss and I really wanted to keep the matte black in the background. So the size of score tape that I'm using is 1.5 inches. And I'm cutting off a small section and then cutting that piece in half, and I find it fits on the back of the squares. After I have pieces of tape on the backs of all the squares, I'm going to start gluing them down. I'm starting in the center and will work my way outwards. I wanted to have a small space in between the squares. My squares aren't evenly placed, and I thought I could use a guide using a small enough strip of paper, but since all the spacings were already off, I thought I would just continue that way. But you could use this method. Once I have all the squares placed, I realized two things. I wasn't happy with it yet because it was too neat, even though the square pacings are off. The second thing I realized was that there was not enough squares, and it was placed too high. So the solution, add more squares. So I'm adding more squares to the side and the bottom and not placing them in a straight line, but more at different angles. I keep going until I have the page more evenly filled. Next, the quote. I'm using Pebbles ABC Stickers. They are the same ones that I used in my washi tape art video. I'm using the packing as a guide. I stick all the letters on the packaging, and then I can visually see where I want the word to go. When I'm satisfied with the layout, I start placing them down. They shifted when I was peeling the packaging off, but no biggie. I used a craft knife to go in and move them around. I really like using the clear packaging because it gives me a chance to visually see how it's going to look when I place the words in different places before having to commit. I like the black letters, but I felt like they didn't stand out as much, so I'm using a white Jelly Roll pen to draw on the lines in the center of the letters. And then to make the rainbow stand out even more, I'm using Faber-castell brush pen in clear. You can already start to see the shimmer from the pen. This pen holds a lot of shimmer. I love the rainbow colors used here, and all the shimmer. Confession, this is the first time putting Faber-castell brush to use, even though I've had it for years. Glad to see it held up over the years of no use. And there you have it, another art journal layout. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.